A lookout screamed, "Hell divers!" I looked up to see 3 black enemy planes plummeting towards our ship. That was 10:22 in the morning of June 4th, 1942. By 10:27, Japan had lost the Pacific War. What made that possible is what the men aboard those carriers believed with complete certainty when they woke up that morning. In the 6 months before Midway, the Kido Butai, Japan's first carrier strike force, had moved through the Pacific like something that could not be stopped. Malaysia fell, Singapore fell, the Dutch East Indies, the Philippines, Darwin. In the Indian Ocean, a British carrier and 2 heavy cruisers went to the bottom in a single afternoon. From Pearl Harbor to Ceylon, the 4 fleet carriers of the Kido Butai had struck everywhere and lost almost nothing. Their pilots had sharpened their skills in the skies over China. Their aircraft, the Mitsubishi A6M0, the Aichi D3A dive bomber, the Nakajima B5N torpedo plane, were, in the hands of these men, the finest naval air weapons in the world. There is a Japanese term that circulated through the Imperial Navy's officer corps in the spring of 1942. Shori Bio. Victory disease. It meant something specific. Not arrogance exactly, but a hardening of the mind against the possibility of failure. A certainty accumulated across 6 months of triumph that the thing working in your favor was not luck, not circumstance, but some deeper structural advantage. The belief that what had worked would keep working, that the next morning would look like the last 6 months of mornings. And the man commanding those 4 carriers was Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo. He had a round, heavily lined face and the bearing of what he was. An old sea dog, happiest aboard ship, unshowy in dress and manner, stocky and weathered. Photographs from 1941 show him on Akagi's bridge in white tropical uniform, looking every inch the conquering commander. He had led the strike on Pearl Harbor. His carriers had swept the Indian Ocean. But Yamamoto was not celebrating. Fleet Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet, had spent much of those 6 months trying to arrange a decisive battle before the arithmetic ran out. He had studied in the United States. He understood what American industry could produce, what it was already producing even as the Kido Butai burned its way across the Pacific. And he knew the window was short, and he knew exactly how it would close if he failed to slam it shut. The victories that had everyone else smiling kept Yamamoto working. On April 18, 1942, 16 American B-25 Mitchell bombers, launched from the carrier USS Hornet, crossed over Tokyo at low altitude and dropped their bombs. The raid was, by military standards, negligible, the damage slight, the aircraft all lost. But the shock to Japanese leadership was severe. The home islands were not supposed to be reachable. Something had to change. Yamamoto already had a plan. He had been working on it for months, forcing it through institutional resistance with the threat of his own resignation. The objective was Midway Atoll, a tiny coral island 1,500 miles northwest of Pearl Harbor. Not because Midway itself mattered, but because America could not afford to let it fall. Seize Midway, force the American carriers out to defend it, destroy them with overwhelming force, compel a negotiated peace before the industrial gap became unbridgeable. The fleet Yamamoto assembled was the largest Japan had ever put to sea. 11 battleships, headed by Yamato, the world's largest, bristling with guns of a caliber no ship had ever carried. 4 heavy carriers, 4 light carriers, 21 cruisers, 65 destroyers. In one critical respect, it was broken before it left port. Yamamoto had dispersed his forces in formations too widely separated to support each other. The carriers that would strike first were hundreds of miles ahead of the battleships meant to finish the work. If something went wrong around the carriers, nothing could reach them in time. And then Yamamoto himself would command from a position nearly 300 miles behind the action. observing radio silence, watching events execute from the bridge of the world's largest battleship, too far back to intervene. There was one more thing Yamamoto did not know. The Americans had spent months breaking Japan's naval codes. By early 1942, cryptanalysts at Pearl Harbor were reading Japanese operational communications with enough clarity to identify not just that an attack was coming, but when and where. To confirm that the target designated AF meant Midway, they sent a false radio message from the island reporting a shortage of fresh water. Japan's radio operators intercepted it and reported that AF was running low on fresh water. The Americans had their confirmation, and Chester Nimitz dispatched his carrier task forces to the waters northeast of Midway before Yamamoto's fleet had even reached its staging areas. By the time the Kido Butai raised its flags and began its transit, the Americans were already in position, already waiting. The hunters were already being hunted. On the morning of June 4th, 3 Japanese admirals stand on 3 bridges in the pre-dawn darkness. Chuichi Nagumo is 55 years old, and he has spent his career mastering a kind of warfare that no longer defines this conflict. He is a torpedo man, a specialist in night surface actions, in the mathematics of attack angles and detonation depths. He has no background in naval aviation. He never believed in the Pearl Harbor operation. He is, and by the assessment of his contemporaries, including Admiral Nishizo Tsukahara, wholly unfitted by background, training, experience, and interest for a major role in Japan's naval air arm. The rigid seniority rules of the Imperial Japanese Navy put him in command of the finest carrier force ever assembled because the seniority rules said it was his turn. On this morning, his 2 most trusted aviation advisors are both incapacitated. His air operations officer, Commander Minoru Genda, is fighting influenza. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, his senior air officer, lies below decks recovering from an appendectomy performed 4 days ago. Taman Yamaguchi is 49, lean and angular, with a hawkish bearing and the kind of impatience that makes lesser men nervous. He attended Princeton University. He speaks English. While he commanded Japan's naval attaché post in Washington, he may understand the Americans better than any senior officer in the fleet. He was, by the judgment of those who knew the Imperial Japanese Navy most closely, perhaps Japan's finest carrier admiral. Astute, aggressive, and ambitious, he commands Carrier Division 2 from the bridge of Hiryu. He is Nagumo's subordinate. At Pearl Harbor, 6 months ago, Yamaguchi signaled Nagumo by blinker lamp that he was ready to launch a 3rd strike. Another blow at the oil storage, the repair yards, the infrastructure the Americans would use to rebuild. Nagumo declined. The yards survived. The oil tanks survived. Yamaguchi made note. Isoroku Yamamoto is 57. He is compact, 5 feet 3 inches. With a broad, strong face and 2 missing fingers on his left hand. So lost at Tsushima in 1905 when he was 21. He plays shogi and poker obsessively. He gambles. He designed this operation, fought for it, built the largest fleet Japan has ever sailed. And he is standing on the bridge of Yamato, 300 miles behind the battle he designed, maintaining radio silence. On Hiryu's flight deck, Lieutenant Joichi Tomonaga prepares to lead the morning strike. He is Hiryu's air commander. Young, calm, capable. Before he boards his aircraft, Yamaguchi finds a moment with him. It is a brief exchange recorded by survivors. Yamaguchi's words are simple. "I will gladly follow you." A promise made before a shot has been fired. Filed, kept. The flight decks of all 4 carriers are alive with red work lights and the warming of engines. 248 aircraft, the finest carrier air arm in the world, pointed at a target that everyone aboard believes is undefended and waiting. At 0430, the Midway strike launches. 72 attack aircraft and 36 Zero fighters begin climbing northeast. In reserve, below decks on all 4 ships, sit the second-wave aircraft, armed, fueled, waiting. Japanese naval doctrine calls for 7 search planes to fan out across the surrounding waters. A wide net capable of spotting enemy ships at distance. One of those planes covers sector number 4, the arc of ocean northeast of Midway, exactly where the American task forces are positioned. That plane launches from the cruiser Tone 30 minutes behind schedule. A catapult malfunction. Petty Officer First Class Amari Yoji, at the controls of Tone 4, does not depart at 0430. He departs at 0500, 30 minutes late, on crossing ocean that should already have been covered. Meanwhile, Tomonaga's strike reaches Midway. Long-range radar has given the island 25 minutes of warning, enough to launch every aircraft from the base. The Japanese find an empty airfield. They bomb runways, fuel storage, and buildings. They shoot down slower American fighters that rise to meet them. But the aircraft that matter are already airborne and safe. Turning for home, Tomonaga radios back. A second attack on Midway is necessary. Below decks on all 4 carriers, ordnance crews receive new orders. The reserve aircraft will be rearmed for another land strike. Bombs are loaded. Somewhere northeast of Midway, Tone 4 is still crossing empty ocean, 30 minutes behind where it should be. At 0728, the radio from Tone 4 arrives. Sight what appears to be 10 enemy surface units, in position bearing 10 degrees, distant 240 miles from Midway, course 150 degrees, speed over 20 knots. On Akagi's bridge, the news lands like a physical blow. There are American ships to the northeast, where Nagumo believed there would be nothing. His position at this moment is genuinely impossible. Tomonaga's aircraft are coming home, running low on fuel, circling overhead, needing to land immediately. The reserve aircraft below decks are in the middle of being rearmed with land attack bombs. To hit those ships, he must reverse the swap, pull the bombs back, load anti-ship weapons, bring the torpedo-carrying Kates up from the hangar deck. That takes time. If he launches immediately with what he has, his dive bombers carry 551-pound ground attack bombs. They're not armor-piercing warheads designed for ship hulls. His most powerful anti-ship weapons are not ready. On Hiryu, Yamaguchi reads the situation differently. His blinker lamp begins to flash. The signal, recorded verbatim in the battle accounts, consider it advisable to launch attack force immediately. It is, for a subordinate, a striking act, breaking protocol, offering unsolicited advice to a superior in the middle of a crisis. Nagumo reads it and declines. The arguments for Yamaguchi's position are real. The arguments against it are also real. And Nagumo weighs them in real time, in minutes, with incomplete information and aircraft circling overhead. He chooses coordination. He will recover the Midway strike. He will rearm fully. He will launch everything, a complete blow from all 4 carriers at once. Below decks on Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, the ordnance crews reverse their work. Bombs hauled back off aircraft. Torpedoes broken out, but in the urgency of the moment. Planes overhead, low on fuel. The old ordnance is not properly stowed. There is no time. Bombs and torpedoes are laid aside in the passageways of the hangar decks. Aviation fuel lines run open across the floors. The crews work fast and do not stop to think about what they are leaving behind them. Nagumo sends a message to Tone 4. Is there a carrier in that formation? The answer comes back, yes. 1 carrier. By the time the confirmation arrives, Tomonaga's aircraft have landed. The decks of all 4 carriers are crowded with fueled armed aircraft, engines being prepared for launch. Below them, in the passageways, the discarded ordnance waits. They came first in waves at sea level, as flying straight. Torpedo Squadron 8 from USS Hornet, Torpedo Squadron 6 from USS Enterprise, Torpedo Squadron 3 from USS Yorktown. 41 Douglas TBD Devastators, obsolete aircraft, slow, underarmed, designed in 1934. Every pilot in those cockpits understood the odds when they crossed into range of the Japanese Zero Combat Air Patrol. Of the 41, 6 survive. Lieutenant Commander John Waldron leads VT-8 and is among the first to die. Lieutenant Commander Eugene Lindsay leads VT-6 into the wall of zeros and does not come back. Lieutenant Commander Lance Massey leads VT-3 and is shot down on approach. Their squadrons are destroyed. Not one torpedo strikes a Japanese carrier, but the Zero fighters that killed those men did so at sea level. To engage the slow, low-flying devastators, if the Combat Air Patrol had descended, burned altitude, burned position, emptied the sky above the Kido Butai. At 10:20, Nagumo issues the launch order. Akagi's flight deck is packed with aircraft, engines warm, propellers turning. The carrier begins its turn into the wind. All 4 decks full, all 4 ships ready. Fuchida, who has dragged himself from sick bay on a recently operated abdomen to stand on the bridge and watch, will record what those final moments looked like. Planes moving up from the hangar all morning, the big ship turning into the wind, everything prepared. Within 5 minutes, all her planes would be launched. 5 minutes. 10:22. Dark shapes drop from the clouds. A lookout screams, "Hell divers!" Fuchida looks up. 3 black enemy planes plummeting toward the ship. The anti-aircraft guns fire frantic bursts. The shapes grow larger. Black objects detach from the wings. A single bomb strikes Akagi. It hits the edge of the midship elevator and penetrates to the upper hangar deck. It detonates among fueled aircraft. It detonates among the bombs and torpedoes left in the passageways. What follows is not a bomb hit. It is a chain. Kusaka records a terrific fire. Within minutes, Akagi is burning from within. Kaga, Soryu. The same sky, the same moment, the same falling shapes. 3 carriers on fire in 5 minutes. What one bomb did to Akagi was not a lucky shot. It was the physical consequence of every decision made since 0430 that morning. The ordnance in the passageways, the open fuel lines, the rearming done in haste. One bomb found all of it. Akagi burns. Nagumo will not leave. Kusaka finds him on the bridge. The Admiral is needed. Most ships are still intact. He must command them. Nagumo nods, half-heartedly. Kusaka persists. Captain Aoki, Akagi's commanding officer, approaches with tears in his eyes. "Admiral, I will take care of the ship. Please, we all implore you, shift your flag to Nagara and resume command of the fleet." A report arrives from below. All passages are on fire. Nagumo climbs from the bridge window. His flag secretary, Lieutenant Commander Nishibayashi, assists him. The conqueror of Pearl Harbor, Darwin, Ceylon, descends a rope on the outside of his burning flagship. It is 1046. He transfers to the light cruiser, Nagara. A carrier flag flies from a cruiser. For the 30 minutes Nagumo makes that transfer, Yamaguchi effectively commands what remains of Japan's carrier force. He does not wait. Hiryu is the last carrier, so Yamaguchi launches immediately with what he has. A patchwork of dive bombers and torpedo planes, all that Hiryu's shredded air group can assemble. No hesitation, no coordination. He sends them after the Americans, following the enemy aircraft back to their source. Hiryu's planes find USS Yorktown. 3 bombs hit her. She loses speed, dead in the water. A second wave, torpedo planes pressing through Yorktown's defensive fire, hits her twice more. With 1 carrier and a broken air group, Yamaguchi had just put an American carrier out of the battle. 4 carriers, 2 hours earlier, with full ordnance loads, could have ended it entirely. The blinker signal that crossed the water between Hiryu and Akagi, ignored twice, is answered now only by what was left undone. Aboard Yamato, 300 miles behind, the reports arrive in fragments. 3 carriers, burning, abandoned. Yamamoto receives them in silence. Ugaki, his chief of staff, watches and records what he sees in Yamamoto's face. Yamamoto turns to his subordinates. "I'm the only one who must apologize to His Majesty." He maintains the appearance of command. He issues orders into the void. At 02:55 on June 5th, the signal goes out. Occupation of Midway is cancelled. All forces withdraw. The largest fleet Japan has ever assembled turns around. There is one irony that belongs here. Yorktown does not sink. American damage control crews working through the afternoon restore her to partial power. She is under tow by the following morning, damaged, listing, alive. The dive bombers that find Hiryu that afternoon and deliver 4 fatal hits are launched in part from her flight deck. So the carrier Yamaguchi had checked off his list, the carrier he had already destroyed, helps destroy him. Night comes over the Pacific. Hiryu is burning on the water. The moon is 3/4 full, what the Japanese calendar calls the 21st day moon. It burns low and bright over the ocean. Earlier that morning, before Tone 4 missed its launch window, before the ordnance changed and the dive bombers fell from the clouds, Tominaga had climbed into a plane with fuel enough to reach Yorktown and not enough to return. He did this knowing it. Yamaguchi watched him go and said, "I will gladly follow you." It was not a figure of speech. The 800 men still aboard Hiryu gather on the flight deck. Yamaguchi leads them in 3 banzai, 3 calls toward Tokyo, toward the Emperor, toward something that is ending. The national anthem is played. Next, then the order, abandon ship. For everyone else, Yamaguchi remains. Captain Tomeo Kaku, Hiryu's commanding officer, stays beside him. A young sailor tries to stay with the officers and is turned away. They share naval biscuits. They share water. The ship burns around them. Yamaguchi says, "Let us enjoy the beauty of the moon." Kaku looks up. How bright it shines! It must be in its 21st day. By the judgment of those who knew the Imperial Japanese Navy most closely, who studied its admirals, sailed under them, measured them against each other, Taman Yamaguchi was Japan's finest carrier commander. Aggressive, prescient, willing to break protocol to act. He had seen what was coming, twice, and said so, twice, and been overruled both times. He had then fought with everything he had left. He knew all of this, and he made his choice before the battle began. He gave his cap to a staff officer and asked him to return it to his family. Nagumo survived. He wept when he told his sons about Midway 2 years later. On July 6, 1944, on the island of Saipan, he put a pistol to his temple. Yamamoto survived. He told his subordinates that he alone would answer to the Emperor. He retained command. In April 1943, American fighter aircraft intercepted his transport over the Solomon Islands, guided again by broken Japanese radio communications. He did not survive that flight. The war Yamamoto had always feared, the long war, the industrial war, the war Japan could never win, had become inevitable before the sun went down on June 4, 1942. In the time it took Japan to complete a single new carrier, the United States launched 1.5. By 1943, America was commissioning 2 large ships every day. The outcome was no longer a question of strategy or of the brilliance of admirals. Hiryu burned through the night. The moon moved across the sky. The ship slipped beneath the surface in the early hours of June 5th, carrying Yamaguchi and Kaku and the promise one admiral had made to another before the shooting started. The moon was 3/4 full and very bright, and the Pacific, after everything, was very quiet.